It was December of '44, the coldest winter I ever remember, and I've never forgotten how the air stung like broken glass in the lungs. They called it the Ardennes, but to me it was just endless woods strangled with snow and silence. By then I'd been in uniform long enough to know the way men smelled when they hadn't washed in weeks. Sweat buried under wool, gun oil clinging to our fingers, the sour rot of boots that had marched too many miles in mud and blood. We were camped near a stretch of road that night, half asleep in the back of a lorry with a canvas top that barely kept the frost off. My breath rose in little clouds. My fingers were numb even inside my gloves. Some of the boys muttered in their sleep, curses, prayers, mothers' names. And then, that sound, engines. At first I thought I was dreaming it. The low, steady rumble of truck engines. You get used to that noise at the front. It's like the heartbeat of the war itself. But there shouldn't have been any convoy on that road. We hadn't gotten orders about supply movement, not in the dead of night, not in weather like that. I remember pushing myself up on one elbow, the canvas creaking as I shifted. My buddy Carter stirred beside me. "You hear that?" I whispered. He rubbed his eyes, grunted. "Probably Krauts. Stay down." But it didn't sound like panzers or motorbikes. No clanking treads, no high-pitched whine. These were trucks, Allied trucks, the kind we drove. I slipped out of the lorry, boots sinking into crusted snow. The cold hit me so hard I gasped. Across the trees just beyond the bend in the road, I saw the glow. Headlights, dozens of them, flickering, stretching down the road like a line of fireflies pinned to the dark. My gut tightened. They moved slow, too slow. Convoys usually pushed hard to avoid being easy targets, but this one crept along as if half asleep, the engines idling heavy, steady, endless. And I swear, this is the part no one ever believes. I couldn't see the drivers. Just shadows in the cabins, like figures slumped forward but never moving, hands locked to wheels. "Christ," Carter muttered, coming up beside me. "What the hell?" I shushed him, but I couldn't stop staring. The snow muffled everything except the engines. That sound got inside my head like it was vibrating in my skull. A dozen, maybe 20 trucks rolling by in a line. Tarps stretched over the beds, canvas dark with frost. No markings I could make out. Just blank, dirty shapes under the headlights. I thought about calling it in, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. Another of our boys, Ruiz, stumbled out of the lorry behind us, rifle slung loose. "Who's moving supplies at this hour?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the edge in his voice. Carter shrugged. "Maybe they're lost, but they weren't slowing, weren't turning, weren't signaling. Just rolling endless. I swear to God I counted 15 trucks. Then 20, then more. But the line never seemed to end." Ruiz took a step toward the road. "Hey!" he barked, raising his hand like a traffic MP. "Convoy! Halt!" No reaction. The headlights kept crawling past, beams cutting the fog that had crept in from the trees. And then, this part has stayed with me like shrapnel in the brain. The fog started to glow, like it was carrying the light itself, thick and yellow, swallowing everything until you couldn't tell where the trucks ended and the mist began. Ruiz cursed under his breath and lowered his rifle. "They didn't see me. They saw you," I muttered. My teeth were chattering, but not just from the cold. "They saw us." Carter grabbed my sleeve. "Listen, do you hear that?" At first it was just the engines pounding, rolling. But underneath, voices, low, muffled, like men talking in the beds of the trucks. But not in English. Not German either. I couldn't place it. It was more like whispers dragged underwater, words stretched and warped. I wanted to turn back, crawl into the lorry, pretend none of it was happening. But my boots wouldn't move. "Orders say no convoys till dawn," Carter muttered half to himself. "So what the hell are we looking at?" We weren't looking at anything human. That's what my gut screamed. But try telling that to a soldier. We trust what we can see, what we can shoot. And all I could see were trucks, endless trucks, rolling like the war itself had come loose and decided to march without us. The last thing I remember before the fog swallowed the road was Ruiz stepping closer, squinting at the license plate of one of the rear trucks. His face went pale. He didn't say a word, just backed up and grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "What?" I hissed. He shook his head, eyes wide, breath clouding fast in the cold. "Those numbers," he whispered. "I saw those numbers before. Back in Normandy. That unit got wiped out in July. Every last one of them." I wanted to tell him he was mistaken, that fatigue and darkness played tricks on the eyes. But the way he said it, the certainty, the raw terror, froze me worse than the snow ever could. The convoy kept rolling. Engines droning, voices whispering, headlights disappearing into fog, and then nothing, silence. The road was empty. No tracks in the snow, no glow of taillights. Just the black skeleton of trees and the breath of 3 half-mad soldiers staring into nothing. Carter spat into the snow, trying to ground himself. "Didn't happen," he muttered, shaking his head. "We didn't see anything. Command'll string us up if we start talking about ghost trucks." But Ruiz wasn't listening. He just kept whispering the numbers he'd seen over and over, like a prayer gone bad. Me? I stood there with the cold gnawing my bones, listening to the silence, and I knew the engines were still out there somewhere. You don't just stop hearing a sound like that. It burrows in. It lingers in your teeth, your skull, your chest. The night the engines wouldn't die. That's what I call it. And I'll swear it to my grave. I still hear them sometimes, rumbling out of the dark, waiting for me to follow. You'd think after months of war, shells screaming, mortars shaking your bones, bullets like bees at your ears, we'd have grown used to fear. But this was different. Bullets you can duck, shells you can brace for, but engines that hum out of nowhere and vanish without leaving tracks? You can't shoot at that. Ruiz was the worst off. He kept muttering those damn numbers, the plate he swore he saw. 313867. Everson like a fever chant. Carter tried to shut him up, gave him a shove once or twice, but it didn't stick. Ruiz would go quiet for 10 minutes, then start whispering it again under his breath. Even while eating his rations, even while lighting a cigarette with his hand shaking so bad he nearly burned his fingers. I didn't tell the others, but that whole day I kept catching myself listening, not to the forest, not to the artillery far off in the distance, but to some place inside me. I swore I could still hear the rumble, faint, like my ribcage remembered what my ears couldn't. That evening, just as the last light drained from the trees, Sergeant Keene came stomping through the snow. Big man, square jaw, eyes like bayonets. He'd fought since North Africa, carried himself like nothing could surprise him. He stopped in front of us and crossed his arms. "Word is you 3 saw something last night," he said flatly. Carter stiffened. "Sir, we—" Keene cut him off with a glare. "Save it. I don't want to hear about fairy tales. But command wants this stretch of road monitored. Reports of supply lines getting hit. You boys will keep watch. Tonight. Understood?" My gut turned to lead, watching the road again, in the same spot. "Yes, Sergeant," we muttered in unison, though I could hear Carter grinding his teeth. By 2200 hours we were crouched by the tree line, rifles slung, breath frosting in the air. The forest smelled of pine sap and cordite, the remnants of some distant skirmish. Lantern light flickered behind us at camp, but out on that road it was nothing but darkness and snow. We waited. Hours passed. My legs cramped, my fingers burned from the cold. Carter grumbled about his feet going numb. Ruiz. He just stared at the road, lips moving silently. Then the fog came. I'll never forget how it rolled in, slow, heavy, crawling across the snow like something alive. It didn't drift like normal fog. It poured, thick as smoke, swallowing the road inch by inch until you couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Not natural. Ruiz whispered, his voice cracking. Carter spat. "It's weather, dumbass. Fog happens." But even he sounded unsure. And then beneath it all came the sound. Engines. Low at first, like a storm over the horizon. Then louder, closer, that same steady thrum like 1,000 pistons pumping in unison, rattling your bones. My mouth went dry. Through the fog, faint at first, came the glow of headlights. Dozens, moving toward us. Jesus, Carter breathed. He raised his rifle, though what he thought he'd shoot at, I don't know. The first truck emerged, half swallowed in mist. Tarpaulin stretched over its back, edges stiff with ice. Its headlights cut through the fog but gave no warmth, just harsh white beams that blinded and burned. Ruiz stood up, hand shaking as he pointed. "That's them. The same trucks. Look, look!" I wanted to tell him to sit down, to shut up, but then I saw the plate, the same numbers. Cold sweat trickled down my spine. One by one, the trucks rolled past. The same as before, slow and steady, engines droning like some endless hymn. But this time I swore I could see the men in the back, figures huddled under the tarps. Helmets tilted, rifles slung, faces pale in the headlight glow, lips moving, whispering, I strained to hear. The voices were low, muffled, carried strange in the fog. Not English, not German. A garbled, broken chorus. But then I caught a word. Just one, my name. I froze. My heart nearly burst. I swear, clear as a bell, one of those pale, whispering mouths formed my name. Carter saw my face and hissed, "What? What is it?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The trucks kept rolling. 30, 40 more. Never ending. Ruiz broke. He screamed at them, waving his rifle. "You're dead." "You hear me? Dead!" I saw the lists. Normandy, July. "You're supposed to be gone." The convoy didn't react. Didn't slow. Just passed him by like he was smoke himself. Carter lunged, grabbed Ruiz, dragged him back before he did something that'd get us all killed, and then Keene appeared behind us, his face pale as he took it in. "Holy Mother of God," he muttered. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd left us on watch alone, but maybe he didn't trust us. Maybe curiosity got the better of him. He stepped out onto the road. "Right into the beams. Convoy halt," he bellowed, voice echoing through the fog. The engines didn't falter. The trucks rolled past him inches away, like he wasn't even there. His shadow flickered across their headlights, but no one looked his way. And then, he did something I'll never forget. He climbed up onto the running board of one of the lead trucks, hand gripping the door handle. "Keene!" Carter yelled. "Get down!" But Keene pulled the door open. Inside, slumped over the wheel, was a man in uniform. American. Helmet cracked. Skin pale as wax. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead, frozen in a rictus grin. His hands gripped the wheel so tight the knuckles were bone white. Keene reeled back, slipped, landed in the snow. He's... His words broke off. The truck rolled on, dragging its corpse driver with it, vanishing into the fog. The convoy stretched for miles. We crouched there, too terrified to breathe, as truck after truck passed. Every driver the same, slumped, dead, grinning. Every bed filled with whispering shadows. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the noise began to fade. Engines dimmed. Headlights swallowed by fog. One moment they were there, the next gone. Silence. We scrambled onto the road. Nothing. No tire tracks. No footprints. Just untouched snow, smooth as a blank page. Keene sat there, shaking like a green recruit, muttering, "I saw him. I saw his face." Carter knelt down, gripped his shoulders. "What the hell was that, Sarge?" "What the hell did we just see?" Keene didn't answer. He just stared into the fog. Ruiz finally spoke, voice hollow. "The convoy's not for the living. It's for them, the ones we lost. They're still moving, still following orders. Forever." I wanted to tell him to shut up, that he was crazy, but I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. That fog, those voices, they weren't bound to roads or maps. They were bound to something else. Something older, darker. And I knew then, this wasn't the last time we'd hear them. Not by a long shot. You ever see a man break? I don't mean crack under fire, or curl up during an artillery barrage. I mean break so deep you know he'll never crawl back out. That was Sergeant Keene after the second night. The rest of the platoon didn't know what we'd seen. Not fully. Rumors spread, of course, they always do. Soldiers whisper worse than nuns. Some said we'd seen a German armored column disguised as our own. Some thought it was nerves, shell shock, maybe too much whiskey in the rations. But none of them looked into Keene's eyes. None of them saw how he shook when night fell, like a boy afraid of the dark. The morning after, he called us three, me, Carter, Ruiz, into a battered shack we were using as a field office. The boards creaked, frost rimmed the windows, and our breath fogged the air as he leaned close across the table. His face was gray, stubble thick on his jaw. "What you saw," he said, voice low. "You don't speak of it. Not to the others, not to command, not unless you want a court-martial. They'll call it cowardice or madness, and either way, you'll be finished." Carter snorted. "Finished? You think we care about stripes right now?" Keene slammed his fist down, rattling the lantern on the table. I said, "Shut it. You don't understand. Those trucks, they're not supposed to be here. They died with their drivers months ago. I know the unit. I knew the captain. He bled out in a hedgerow in Normandy. I saw the report myself. But they're still moving." Ruiz leaned forward, eyes wild. "Following orders. That's what I told you. They don't stop because they can't. Not till the war ends. Or maybe not ever." I remember the lantern flame flickering against the frost, shadows dancing on the wall, and in that moment, I hated all of it. The war, the snow, the trucks. Most of all, the silence after the engines faded. Silence that felt heavier than shellfire. That night, we were ordered to move east, deeper into the forest. Command wanted us to reinforce a unit that had gone missing along the road. A convoy, they said. Medical trucks. No word since last contact. When we heard that, the three of us traded looks. Carter muttered a curse under his breath. Ruiz went pale. Keene just stared at the floor. We marched anyway. Orders don't care about fear. The road east was black as coal, tree branches clawing at the moonlight. Snow crunched under our boots, weighed down with mud. My rifle strap bit into my shoulder, and every step felt heavier than the last. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thumped, dull and far away. But mostly it was quiet. Too quiet. Around midnight, the column halted. The captain, different from Keene, younger, full of that officer's arrogance, ordered a halt and a perimeter check. We set up along the ditch, rifles ready, breath steaming. My ears strained against the silence, every creak of leather and crunch of snow setting me on edge. Then came the lights. Faint at first. Just specks on the horizon, Carter whispered. Oh God, not again. But this was different. These lights weren't crawling through fog. They came fast, too fast for trucks. They cut through the trees like burning knives, twin beams swerving, bobbing. Headlights, someone shouted down the line. The captain barked, "Hold your fire! Identify before you shoot." We squinted into the dark, rifles raised. The beams grew brighter, closer, until I could see the glare bouncing off tree trunks. Then, screeching brakes. Grinding gears. The unmistakable sound of engines in pain, but there was nothing there. The road was empty. No vehicles, just those lights floating, swaying, blinding us. Jesus Christ, a private muttered. Steady, the captain snapped, though I heard the tremor in his voice. Probably Kraut trickery. Stay sharp, but I knew better. We all did. The lights swerved suddenly, sweeping across our line. They passed over Carter, over Ruiz, over me. When they hit me, my stomach dropped. Because in that instant, I saw faces. Dozens of them, layered in the beams. Pale, hollow, eyes wide open, mouths whispering soundlessly. The dead burned into light itself. I staggered back, nearly dropped my rifle. My legs turned to water. The captain shouted again, but his voice sounded far away. The beams tilted upward, then blinked out. Darkness swallowed the road. Silence. Ruiz was the first to speak. They're scouting us. The convoy sent them ahead. Shut up, Carter hissed. But Ruiz wasn't wrong. In my gut, I felt it. Those lights weren't random. They were searching, like lanterns swinging in a mine, hunting survivors. The captain tried to rally us, ordered us forward, but morale was gone. Men shuffled, muttered prayers, fingers trembling on triggers. We were walking dead ourselves, just waiting for our turn to be called. Around 300. The fog returned. It rolled thick across the road, curling around our boots, rising like smoke from the frozen earth. My lungs burned with every breath of it, damp and sour. Engines rumbled again. Louder this time, heavier. Carter swore under his breath. Ruiz crossed himself. Keene just stared into the dark like a man waiting for a bullet. The headlights appeared, dozens of them, brighter than before. The convoy was back. This time they weren't silent. We heard voices, clear as day, rising above the engines. Orders barked in English, the cadence of NCOs shouting men forward. "Keep moving! Don't stop, push on!" And then, layered beneath, groans. Agony. Men choking on their own blood. The tarpaulins fluttered in the wind as the trucks passed. I swear I saw arms hanging limp over the sides, fingers gray and stiff. The faces of the dead flickered in the glass, reflected in their own headlights. The captain lost it. He screamed, "Open fire!" The night erupted. Rifles cracked, machine guns spat fire into the dark. Muzzle flashes tore through fog. Men shouted, cursed, cried out, but the convoy didn't flinch. Bullets tore through them like mist. Trucks rolled steady, drivers grinning corpses, passengers whispering still. One truck even slowed, passed so close I could have touched it. And I swear, I felt cold fingers brush my sleeve. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. Engines fading, headlights vanishing. Fog curling back into the trees. Silence again, but not for long. Half the platoon was gone. Just gone. Where they'd stood firing a moment ago, there was nothing but churned snow. No bodies, no rifles, just absence, like they'd been erased. The captain dropped to his knees, sobbing, clawing at the snow where his men had been. "Bring them back," he whispered. "Bring them back." Keen hauled him up, slapped him hard across the face. "They're gone, sir." "Get hold of yourself!" But his own eyes betrayed him. He was barely hanging on. Ruiz grabbed me by the collar, shaking me. "Don't you see? We're next!" That's what they want. They're recruiting, filling the ranks. Every night, more trucks, more whispers. I shoved him off, but his words burrowed deep. Because when the fog lifted, the road was smooth. No tracks, no blood, no sign of a battle at all. Only the silence. Always the silence. We stumbled back to camp at dawn, fewer than half our number. No one asked questions. No one wanted answers. The war was full of madness. What was one more story? But I knew. Carter knew. Ruiz most of all. The convoy wasn't just passing through. It was hunting. And one night it would come for us. Headlights on the black road, engines droning like a funeral march. That sound never leaves you. Not in the day, not in the quiet hours before dawn. It lives inside the bones waiting, and I can tell you this much. When you hear it, when you feel the ground tremble and the fog rolls thick, don't look at the lights. Don't listen to the whispers, because they're calling your name, and if you answer, you'll never march with the living again. You know what sticks with me most? Not the engines, not the lights, not even the men who vanished. It was the sound of orders. Orders barked out from throats that hadn't drawn breath in months. Even now, if I close my eyes, I can hear them. Sharp, clipped, the kind of cadence only drilled into soldiers. "Keep moving! Stay in line! Load and cover!" The same phrases we'd shouted 100 times ourselves, only these came wrapped in the rattle of the grave. After that night on the Black Road, none of us were the same. The captain never recovered. He walked around camp like a ghost already, eyes glassy, mumbling apologies to men who weren't there. A week later, he put his service pistol in his mouth. No letter. No explanation, just silence, and then a mess for the medics. Keen tried to pick up the pieces. He was still technically in charge, but we could see him unraveling. He'd jump at shadows, bark at us for staring too long, and every time a truck passed, even the living ones, real flesh and blood supply convoys, he'd freeze up, hand hovering near his sidearm like he expected corpses to climb out of the beds. Ruiz went the other way. He became obsessed. He started drawing symbols in the margins of his field notebook, numbers, sketches of trucks, faces he claimed he saw in the fog. Sometimes he'd wake in the middle of the night screaming, "Fall in! Fall in!" like he was answering roll call for the dead. Carter had to pin him down once to stop him running straight into the forest with no boots on. And me, I just tried to keep breathing. That's all survival really is in war. One more breath, one more day. But at night, when the lantern burned low and the frost crept along the walls, I'd hear it. A voice, calm, steady, giving me an order. Not an enemy's voice, not a comrade's, something in between. Something older. It told me to move, to march, to follow. We thought maybe we'd left it behind when they pulled us back toward Bastogne. The Battle of the Bulge was still raging, and the forest was alive with gunfire and snow thick as smoke. But the living enemy was almost a relief compared to the other thing. The thing that had no flag. Our relief didn't last long. One night, Christmas Eve. I think though dates blurred in those days, we were dug into a half-frozen foxhole, trying to keep our cigarettes shielded from German eyes. Snow was falling steady, muffling the world in white. Then we heard it again. Engines. Carter's cigarette slipped from his fingers. He didn't even notice it burning out in the snow. "No," he whispered. "Not here. Not now." But the sound grew. Rumble after rumble, steady as a heartbeat, rolling closer. Ruiz scrambled to his knees, eyes wide, grinning like a madman. "They found us. I told you they'd come. They follow the roads, all roads, every road." Keen grabbed him by the collar, shoved him down into the foxhole. "Shut your mouth!" His voice cracked. "They're not here. You hear me? They're not." But the headlights bloomed through the trees before he could finish. They cut through the snowfall like knives, dozens of them, weaving between the trunks where no truck should have fit. The forest should have stopped them, but the trees bent, swayed, opened, like the woods themselves wanted to let them pass. The first truck rolled by, and the voices began again. "Column left. Keep moving! Don't stop!" It wasn't shouting anymore, it was commanding, direct, as if those words weren't just for the dead, they were for us too. I felt it in my spine. My legs twitched, muscles wanting to rise, to obey. My body leaned forward against my will, breath ragged. "Stay down!" Carter hissed, gripping my sleeve. "For God's sake, stay down." But Ruiz didn't listen. He climbed out of the foxhole, straightened his back, and saluted. "I'm here," he shouted. His voice cracked, but it carried in the still night. "Reporting for duty." Keen cursed and tried to drag him back, but Ruiz broke free, running into the headlights. I saw him lit up for a moment. Just a boy, frost on his eyelashes, rifle bouncing on his back. And then the fog swallowed him. The trucks rolled on. We never saw him again. Not a scream, not a body, not even footprints. Just gone, like the others, like he'd been written out of the world. Carter collapsed against the wall of the foxhole, head in his hands. "He's gone," he muttered. He joined them. Just like he wanted, Keen didn't move for a long time. His breath came in ragged bursts. Finally he whispered, "They're recruiting." His voice was hoarse. "They need soldiers. They've been taking them all along. Every night more. Taking them for what?" I asked, though my throat was dry, my voice barely my own. He didn't answer. The weeks blurred. Bastogne raged on. Real shells, real blood. Men froze. Men bleed. Men died. The living war swallowed us whole. But under it, always under it, the engines hummed. Sometimes faint, sometimes close. Sometimes we'd see headlights flicker just beyond the tree line, and I'd hold my breath, waiting to hear my name whispered again. Carter held on, but just barely. He grew mean, snapping at anyone who spoke of the trucks. He swore he'd put a bullet in the head of the next man who even mentioned them. But at night, I saw him clutching his helmet, rocking back and forth, mouthing words like a prayer. I think he was bargaining with himself. Keen grew quieter, too. Not broken, not obsessed, just quiet, like he was listening all the time, listening for orders only he could hear. One night I caught him standing in the road alone, back straight, hand resting on his rifle. I whispered his name, asked him what he was doing. "Waiting," he said simply. "For what?" He looked at me, and I'll never forget the calm in his eyes. "For orders." That's when I knew we were doomed. Not from bullets. Not from the cold. From something deeper. We were soldiers, and soldiers live on orders. Strip that from us, and we crumble. But these weren't orders from captains or generals or even the high command. These came from somewhere else. Somewhere past death, and men like Ruiz, and maybe even Keen, were ready to follow. It wasn't madness. Not really. It was habit. The kind drilled so deep into you that when a voice says fall in, you don't question if it comes from a living man or a dead one. You just fall in. I held out as best I could. Carter too. But both of us knew it was only a matter of time before the headlights found us again, and this time, maybe we wouldn't have the strength to stay down. That's the thing about war. Everyone breaks eventually. Some break from fear, some from blood, some from silence, and some from orders they can't stop hearing. The last time I saw Keen alive was late January. Snow was melting into slush, the ground turning to sucking mud. He came to me quietly, sat down in the barracks while I cleaned my rifle. "You ever think," he said, voice soft, "that maybe it's not so bad? To keep marching? To have somewhere to go, even after it's all over?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He stood, patted my shoulder, and walked out into the night. An hour later, Carter shook me awake. "He's gone," he said. I didn't have to ask where. The engines had called and Keen had obeyed. You'd think after that night, after the fog, after the voices and the headlights that cut like knives through the dark, I would have found some explanation. Men always try to explain things, even the unexplainable. Chalk it up to nerves, fatigue, stress, or tricks of the weather. That's what the colonel wrote in his report anyway. A natural fog phenomenon exaggerated by wartime stress. Those were his words, neat, clinical, cowardly, but I was there. And when I close my eyes, I still am. When the dawn finally broke, it came like a curtain tearing open after too long in the dark. Pale gray light spread across the road, weak at first, then stronger, pushing back the mist. We stood there, what was left of us. 10 men, maybe. I don't even remember the number exactly. I'd stopped counting bodies. The mud was thick, boots half buried, and the silence was the worst of it. No engines, no radios crackling, no shouted orders. Just the drip of melting frost from tree branches and the sound of our own ragged breathing. We expected to see wreckage. Burned-out trucks, tire tracks, shell casings, something. War always leaves something behind. But there was nothing. The convoy we'd followed all night, the headlights we'd seen cutting through the fog, the figures we swore we'd glimpsed in the beams, they were gone. Not destroyed, not captured, not even a dent in the earth where wheels should have rolled. Nothing. I remember Sergeant Keegan bending down, running his calloused hand over the frozen dirt road. His face twisted as he muttered, "Ain't even tracks." His voice broke on the last word. We all looked. Hell, we searched for hours. We combed through the trees, the ditches, anywhere a vehicle might have turned off, though none of it made sense. Every mile of that road was choked with snow and mud. A truck couldn't have gone 10 feet off without leaving ruts deep enough to swallow a man's boots. But there was nothing. The men started whispering. Quiet at first, but fear has a way of growing louder the longer silence stretches. I caught words carried on the morning wind. Ghosts, damned, not of this world. Corporal Dunn crossed himself so many times I thought he'd wear his fingers raw. Keegan barked at them to shut up, said they were talking like frightened children. But when his eyes met mine, I saw it. The same fear, the same questions, the same knowledge we all shared but dared not say aloud. By noon, command finally reached us. A jeep pulled up, tires slushing in the half-thawed mud. Out stepped Captain Armitage, a man who never cracked a smile and never raised his voice. He looked at us, what was left of us, and his expression didn't change. Like he'd expected this. "Where's the convoy?" he asked. No one answered. We just stared back at him, haggard, filthy, eyes hollow from what we'd seen, or thought we'd seen. "Where is it?" He repeated, sharper this time. Keegan finally snapped. "You tell us, Captain." We followed it all goddamn night. Headlights, engines, orders barked from the mist. And now nothing. Not a tire track. Not a single bloody crate. Nothing. His voice cracked, half rage, half despair. Armitage just looked at him, then at me, then at the others. His silence weighed more than words. He pulled out a notebook, scribbled something down, closed it with a snap and said, "Report back to base." That's an order. That was it. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the dead we'd lost chasing phantoms. No mention of the way the fog carried voices that didn't belong to the living. Just an order to go back, eat our rations, reload, and be ready to march again. But I couldn't let it go. That night, while the others slept or tried to, I stayed awake by the dim glow of a lantern in the barracks. The smell of oil and damp wool clung to the air. My hands shook as I lit a cigarette. But it wasn't the nicotine I needed. It was the ritual. Something solid, something real in a world that had come undone. I kept hearing them. The voices. Orders barked in German, clipped and sharp the way they'd sounded in the fog. But every now and then they'd shift, soften, turn into something else. English, familiar accents. Men I knew were already dead. Men I'd served with years before, lost in battles I still dream about. And the headlights. God help me. Sometimes I see them even when my eyes are closed. Two beams cutting through the dark, steady, unblinking, waiting for me to follow. Weeks passed and the war dragged on, as it always does. We moved to another front, another country, another line of mud and blood and waiting. But I never forgot that road, that convoy that vanished into nothing. Years later, decades maybe, I found myself in a bar, somewhere far from the fighting, long after the war had ended. A veterans' bar where men nursed whiskey and memories. I overheard a group of old British soldiers swapping stories. One of them, an old chap with a limp and a voice like gravel, leaned in close and said, "Ever hear about the convoy?" Out near the Ardennes, winter of '44, whole column disappeared in the fog. Swear to God, lads followed him for hours. Come morning, gone. Like they never existed. My hand froze around my glass. My throat went dry. I didn't speak, just listened. And in their voices I heard my own memory echoed back. So maybe it wasn't just us. Maybe there were others. Maybe that road still carries them, those lost convoys, those men who never made it home, still driving through the fog, engines rumbling in the night, headlights cutting a path that leads nowhere. Or maybe it was worse. Maybe whatever we saw wasn't them at all. Sometimes, when the night is still and the wind rattles the windows, I swear I hear it again. The low hum of engines idling, the crunch of tires on gravel, the muffled bark of orders that carry no warmth of the living. And I wonder, if I stepped outside, if I followed the sound into the dark, would I find them? Would I see those beams cutting through the mist, waiting for me to fall in line? Would I vanish too, swallowed whole by a convoy that never truly was? Maybe that's how it ends for me. Not in a hospital bed, not in the slow decay of old age, but on some forgotten road, boots heavy with mud, ears ringing with the echoes of a war that never lets go. Maybe one night, when the engines start again, I won't resist. And when the silence comes after, silence where the convoy should have been, I'll be part of it, part of the ghost convoy, forever on the road.